Hey guys, this is Nick with Phone Arena, and believe it or not, this is the world's fastest smartphone, at least kind of. This is the Huawei Ascend P2, which has support for 150 megabits per second LTE download speeds. This kind of speed can theoretically be reached assuming your network carrier supports it. Other than that, the smartphone belongs to the mid-range category and has some pretty good hardware specs. There's a 4.7-inch LCD display on its front, a quad-core processor is powering the device, and on its back we have a 30 megapixel camera with autofocus. So let's check out the Huawei Ascend P2 and see how it performs. Huawei has chosen to go with a minimalistic approach when designing the Ascend P2, and the results are pretty good. The smartphone looks sleek, elegant and professional, and it's made to appeal visually to members of both genders. Besides, we must mention that the smartphone is very slim and very light, as one can instantly notice that the very second they pick this handset up. But while the Huawei Ascend P2 looks okay, we aren't quite satisfied with the materials it is made of. We're reviewing the black matte version of it, and it feels way too ordinary to the touch, even with a hint of cheapness to it. At least the black plastic surface does a good job at repelling fingerprints. The sides of the smartphone are curved towards the back. That makes the handset easier to grasp, but at the same time, this design feature may prevent the user from comfortably operating the power key and the volume buttons. This isn't really a deal-breaking issue, but it must be noted. There are 3 capacitive buttons underneath the display on the Ascend P2. These are used, of course, for navigating through the interface, serving as back, home and menu keys. We find nothing wrong with their placement, as reaching any of them is quite easy. The beautiful 4.7-inch LCD touchscreen is one of the strongest assets that the Ascend P2 has to offer. It has a resolution of 720 by 1280 pixels, which results in a pixel density of 310 ppi, and that's very good. Details in graphics and images look nice and sharp, and even small text can be easy to read. Also, colors are very well represented without being over or undersaturated. And while we find nothing wrong with their calibration, there's a menu in the settings list that allows one to adjust the color temperature. Gloves mode is a neat feature that can be toggled on when it's needed. Basically, it makes the screen extra sensitive, allowing you to use it even while wearing gloves. The Huawei Ascend P2 comes running Android 4.1.2 out of the box, and its interface has been heavily customized. What you actually see is Emotion UI 1.5 by Huawei, which brings along a number of personalization options. One of them is the selection of themes, which range from colorful and cartoonish to plain and simple in appearance. Furthermore, the user is free to pick among several different lock screens, and the wallpapers can be set to shuffle randomly at specific intervals of time. Functionality has not been overlooked either. The notification bar hosts a number of toggle buttons which can be rearranged according to the user's liking. That's a common and welcome modification. Also, there are different profiles that can be set, changing the phone's volume settings and whatnot depending on whether the user is at home, outdoors or in a meeting. Unlike most other Android interfaces that we've come across, Emotion UI doesn't have an applications drawer. Instead, the icons for the installed applications are listed right on the home screen in a manner inspired by iOS. That contradicts with Android's design principles, but nevertheless, we don't find this feature annoying at all. In fact, we're sure that some people will like this UI better because of its simplicity. There are 2 on-screen keyboards pre-installed on the Huawei Ascend P2, and the first one is the default Android keyboard which we all know and love, while the other is provided by Huawei itself. The Huawei keyboard is also comfortable with easy-to-hit buttons, and we like how symbols can be entered just by swiping down on the respective button. The K3V2 system-on-chip by Huawei is in use with the Ascend P2. It has a 1.5 GHz quad-core processor backed up by 1 GB of RAM, which is a combination delivering adequate performance for a mid-range smartphone. The chip is obviously by no means a benchmark crusher, but in reality it is powerful enough to get the basic tasks done. Navigating through the interface feels smooth in general, with slowdowns occurring only on rare instances, when exiting or switching between heavy applications, for example. Games, including the latest 3D titles, run at high frame rates, but most of the time only. The Huawei Ascend P2 doesn't have a microSD card slot for storage expansion, which is a major drawback. Out of the 16GB present on board, only 11.83GB are available to the user. And while that will be sufficient for a great fraction of consumers, those who like to store lots of audio and media on their handset are in for a disappointment by the lack of free space. We have the default Android web browser loaded on the Huawei Ascend P2 out of the box. This means there are no extra browsing tools added by the manufacturer. Just the default set of features are in stock, such as support for multiple tabs, embedded YouTube videos, saving pages for offline use, and the likes. The application's performance is satisfactory but not quite perfect, as even though pages are rendered fast, switching between them might take a while. The alternative web browsers that we tried didn't really perform any better. In theory, the Huawei Ascend P2 is capable of reaching peak download speeds of 150 megabits per second, which is crazy fast by today's standards, but most LTE networks across the world cannot really provide as much bandwidth. But it is good to know that the smartphone is future-proof, at least in that respect. There are several ways of launching the camera app on the Huawei Ascend P2, and one of them is by using the shortcut on the lock screen. The other one is by double tapping the dedicated camera shutter, which is located on the lower right-hand side of the device. Speaking of which, the two-stage camera key is really comfortable for use while taking photos and video. The shape of the device, however, doesn't really feel optimal for the purpose. So this is the camera user interface on the Huawei Ascend P2. It is definitely not short on features, and the arrangement of its menus is easy to get used to. With its 30 megapixel camera, the device can take panoramic photos and 10 full resolution shots in just a second. There's also an HDR option for both photos and video, although we weren't really happy with the results. As for the actual photos taken with the Huawei Ascend P2, they're mostly okay as long as there's enough light to work with. The high-resolution sensor can capture objects in detail, and the presence of digital noise is kept well under control. Color representation is on the neutral side, which is good, but the dynamics range leaves room for improvement. Shooting in low light yields photos that are definitely noisier with lifeless colors, while the LED flash fails to provide enough light to illuminate the frame. We have definitely seen better 1080p videos out of other 13 megapixel cameras. Captured at 1080p resolution, the videos by the Ascend P2 are passable but could have been smoother and with more detail. Indoor videos taken in low light are noisy and sometimes out of focus. Here's the music player that is loaded on the Huawei Ascend P2. It can list the loaded songs by artist or album name, and it will display album art as well. The mandatory lock screen controls and home screen widget are also present. There are several cool tricks thrown in as well, such as the lyrics support and the ability to set any song as a ringtone. The built-in Dolby Digital Plus feature serves as an equalizer with lots of presets. The best thing about the video player on the Ascend P2 is that it handles any video file format we threw at it. Any video sample that we tried ran perfectly at up to 1080p resolution, and with its beautiful large screen, the smartphone is definitely suitable for watching video. This video player application, however, is extremely basic and has no advanced features whatsoever. Phone calls made using the Huawei Ascend P2 sound loud, clear, and natural through the phone's earpiece. The microphone also works well, although it does sound a bit sharper at higher frequencies. No static or background noises disturb the conversation during calls. There's a 2420 mAh battery inside the Huawei P2, and chances are that its battery life won't disappoint you. Just keep in mind that the battery is sealed and cannot be replaced. The device is rated for 12 hours of continuous talk time on 3G networks, or it should last through 11 days of standby time. There is a way of increasing the battery life of the device, but that depends on what mode you have the device set in. There are several modes depending on whether you value battery life or performance. Also, there is a way of tweaking which applications are loaded on startup. So in conclusion, the Huawei Ascend P2 is an okay mid-range Android smartphone. Of course, it is far from being the ultimate device of this class, but it definitely gets the job done, and it doesn't have any major drawbacks, with the exception of the lack of a microSD card for storage expansion. This beautiful 4.7-inch display is definitely the thing we like the most about this device, followed by the slim profile and the lightweight body. So if these are the features you value the most, then the Huawei Ascend P2 likely won't disappoint you. Of course, there is a number of alternatives you should check out before getting the Huawei Ascend P2. For example, the Sony Xperia SP is a great similarly priced mid-range Android smartphone with a large high-resolution display and a capable processor. If design and appearance are your cup of tea, then you can check out the Huawei Ascend P6, which is currently the thinnest smartphone in existence, and it would be an excellent choice. Last year's Samsung Galaxy S3 would also be a good pick, because you should be able to grab one for about as much as the Ascend P2 costs right now. Thank you for watching our video review of the Huawei Ascend P2. This is Nick. To learn more about this device, go check out our website, phonearena.com.